Welcome, everybody, to the Nuggets of Gold YouTube channel and podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the 49ers schedule released, and I'll flash it up on the screen right here. But basically, for today's episode, we're going to go over this record prediction, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Trey Lance maybe taking over after the Week 6 bye. But let's get into it. The schedule opens up 2 road games, first one in Detroit, second one in Philly, and let's just hear what your thoughts are on this opening 2 games, Aiden.
I think it's 2 games that the Niners should be favored in. I think we opened as 7-point favorites over the Lions, facing our old pal Jared Goff in Week 1. Excited for the Niners to play that guy again. I would be surprised if the Niners don't start 2-0, but of course you may look ahead to assuming Rodgers plays a big Sunday night game against the Packers. But I think we start out 2-0.
Yeah, I think so as well. And also, side note, this Philly game might be one that me and Aiden are going to. So hopefully, 2 wins in both of those games. I fully expect them to beat Detroit. I know they have the highest line for Week 1, which is -7. And then the Eagles game. I mean, the Eagles front office and just kind of their organization seems to be in a little bit of a flux. They do have some talent on that roster. I don't think that's just like an easy win, but I do think the 49ers are a better team than the Eagles right now. So I think both those games should be a win. And then the Packers game, I will say I definitely think this one's going to be a win. I don't think Rodgers is going to play for Green Bay next year, just where it's at right now. I really do think he's likely to retire. He was just doing some stuff, some TV stuff. I know he obviously has the Jeopardy stuff, but I don't know. I don't think he's going to be there. And I think, honestly, either way, I think the 49ers take that game.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it in the playoffs in 2019 and during the regular season. It seems like the Niner defense kind of has LaFleur's number there. And I mean, I think even if Rodgers plays, Niners are probably favored, but assuming Rodgers doesn't play, I think it would reach 7-point favorite scale, like almost turn into the Lions again. But I mean, I guess we don't know how good Jordan Love is. I guess he could be Mahomes, but we don't really know quite yet.
Yeah, no, definitely on that. And then after this Packers game, so you're thinking a win 3-0 to start?
Yes, if I had to put it down, yeah.
All right, so we got a 3-0 start in our opinions. Then the next 2 games, 2 divisional opponents, the Seahawks at home and then the Cardinals on the road. I'm going to say these are both going to be losses. Just because, I mean, these division games have been so tight. I think that the 49ers are likely to either split these divisional opponent games or even maybe lose it. Or even if they win, I don't think, they're coming out there and sweeping 2 of these teams. I think most likely you're going to see a split all around. Just a really strong division in the NFC West. So I do think that these 2, I'm going to say they're going to be losses. But Aiden, what do you think about these 2 matchups, one against the Seahawks and then one in Arizona?
Of course, you never really know what to expect in the division, but if I had to put it down, I think we win the first Seahawks game. Much easier to play those guys away from home. And I just do not trust their offensive line or really even their entire defense. The Niners beat them late last year or played them super duper tough. I can't remember. But I do agree. I think we probably start 4-0, then lose to the Cardinals and go into the bye. And this is where it gets really interesting, where I love the early bye, because if a guy like Trey Lance is ready and is making strides early in the season, if you lose a couple games that you're not supposed to out of these first 5, I could see Trey Lance taking over during this Week 6 bye, and coming out for his first start against the Colts on Sunday night, which would be super fun.
So let's get into that a little bit. I don't think he's going to be starting this season. I've said that I think it's a full year where Jimmy Garoppolo should be expected to be the starter, unless there's injuries, of course. But what do you think? Like, what do you think it's going to take? Do you think, because if they do lose those games against the Cardinals and the Seahawks, do you think that is something where we could see him take over as soon as Week 7?
I could definitely see it possible. The more that I think about it, though, I think Kyle wants to play him sooner rather than later. We heard that the Niners' plan A this offseason was sign Dalton and draft Lance and then trade Jimmy. And like Dalton would have had to come in and learn the playbook the same as Lance. Obviously, he's a little bit more of a veteran, so would have a bit of a head start there. But that being plan A makes me think that they may have wanted Lance to start week 1. I don't think that that's out of the question. And if Jimmy loses and doesn't play well in a couple of those 5 games where Kyle's like, hey, if we started Lance, we may have won that game. I could see Jimmy getting the yank, or maybe even gets moved to a team like Denver, for example, if Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock are still not working out and they're unable to make a trade for Rodgers. There's a couple quarterback needy teams, even the Packers potentially. Jimmy already knows that scheme. I think it creates flexibility, and I love the opportunity to have Lance potentially sit for a third of the season and come out guns blazing a little bit. But of course, we don't know. I think it depends. If the Niners are 5-0 and 4-1 going into the bye week, I don't think Trey Lance comes out. But if they're 3-2 or under 500, I would be shocked if he doesn't come out of the bye week, I guess.
No, I mean that's something that a lot of people have been talking about. How early will Lance start? And I feel like I'm definitely in the minority when I don't think that he's going to be starting this year. Not that I even think it's like that he needs to not like take a full year off. I don't really think I'm able to determine that right now. We haven't even seen him in training camp, so I think it's pretty early to kind of decide when he could be out. I definitely see that as a possibility. We also see like a lot of times the quarterback change does seem, for I don't know, whatever reason, it does seem to happen during the bye. But I mean, that would be pretty early. I think you'd have to see him look good in preseason. I think the offense like must not be clicking, and they can still win some of these games if the offense doesn't look great. I mean, look at Detroit, for example. I think that they should have a very, very good defensive performance in that week. But you kind of look at it, if the offense is lagging early on, definitely could see that. And looking back, like in 2019, the offense did lag early. So even if you had that kind of start to a season where you're winning, but the offense isn't looking good, and they just want to change it up, and they decide, we think Lance is ready, we're going to go with them. I think the first game he could come out there could definitely be that Indianapolis Sunday Night Football game, which wouldn't that be sweet? I mean, you have a guy, first game he comes out is against a really good team with, DeForest Buckner, who's a former 49er, and you have him come out there and play that game. But that definitely a possibility. So I think it's always fun to kind of talk about when maybe Trey Lance could have that happen. And just based off the schedule release, definitely a possibility that first game is week 7. But going back to kind of that week 7 game, what do you think? Do you think that's a game that the Niners should win?
I think it's a game that they should win, but it's definitely. I mean, the Colts were a playoff team last year. I think that they upgraded at quarterback. I don't think Philip Rivers was great for them. I think Wentz is going to be better for them. He's coming back with Frank Reich. I think Wentz is going to have a better year than people think. Obviously, maybe not an MVP, but I think he's going to be an average starter at worst. I think that's a tough game. It's kind of 50-50. I'm going to say the Niners win, given that they're coming off the bye, but I would not be surprised if the Colts come out and, I guess, win one.
Yeah, and that's the thing about doing these schedule record predictions. It's like so many things can happen. There's so many injuries that can be involved, but you're just kind of looking at it like week by week as if both teams are mostly healthy or fully healthy. But I think the 49ers should be able to win this game. The Colts, fantastic team. I think they're one of the top teams in the AFC, but you're coming off a bye. We've seen how great Kyle Shanahan is like off of a bye. I mean, the 49ers have really performed well in those games. And then after that, you have a Bears team who knows, maybe you have another rookie starting that game. So that would be really interesting. What if that's the game? What if that's the game that they both come in and 2 first starts potentially? That'd be crazy. I think that we'll see Justin Fields earlier than Trey Lance though. But then, what about this little stretch of the Colts, the Bears, the Cardinals, the Rams? Because those are all 4 really good teams in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say win at the Bears, Halloween. That's a cold game. I'll say that we lose that one, beat the Cardinals, and on Monday night, I think we beat LA. Um, I think we beat LA. 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 I think we beat L So I think we do that little stretch 3-1. But again, I'm not as high on Stafford as you are, Matt. I think the Rams have some holes, especially on defense, and their defense was so good last year. I think that they lost a couple guys that are gonna like see that this year their loss is gonna be felt a little bit more. And given it's at home Monday night, I don't think the Niners are gonna lose that game. So I would say 3-1 in that little 4-game stretch.
I I personally think this is like the biggest 4-game stretch of the season, just because it's right after the bye and you're playing a legit team each week. I mean, you have the Colts, who are really just solid all around. Defense is probably going to be better than it was last year. Same thing with the offense. I think Wentz is perfect for that system. And then you have the Bears, who, if they have Justin Fields and that offense kind of gets going, they could be really, really scary. The Rams, I mean, I've already talked about it. I think the Rams are really good. I do think the Rams are going to be the division winners in the NFC West this year. I don't know how quickly Trey Lance can develop. I think they could easily overtake them after that's kind of the case. But even if the Niners do have Trey Lance starting this year, I think the Rams are going to be the division winner. And the Cardinals they're not bad. They got a star quarterback in Kyler Murray, in my opinion. Their offense has been lagging, though, so we'll kind of see how it looks compared to past seasons. But I definitely think this is a huge stretch, and I think 3-1 should be the goal and really the expectation for this stretch. But then the next 4-game stretch after that, you got the Jaguars, the Vikings, the Seahawks in Seattle, and then the Bengals also on the road in Cincinnati. I like them to beat the Jaguars and the Bengals. I definitely think those are 2 road games that you want to win. And as far as the Vikings, I think they should win that game. We've just kind of seen how they matched up to them recently. 2019, they were a much better team, and the Vikings are definitely going to be a solid team. They're getting a lot of guys back on defense. But I think the Niners are just a little bit, put together to win that game a little bit better. And then the Seahawks, I said they're going to lose the one at home. They're going to win the one on the road. I mean, we know how weird these 49ers Seahawks games get. So I'm going to have them split them, and then both teams winning the road game. But what do you think about this little stretch here?
I think that this Jaguars game is a bit of a trap game. I expect the Jaguars to be much better. And coming off a Monday night game that I think the Niners are going to win, to come out the next week at 10 a.m., I think you win that game, but I think it's a lot tighter than it probably should be. I think you beat the Vikings. I don't trust Kirk at all. I think you lose to Seattle in Seattle on Sunday night. We haven't been able to consistently win in Seattle. And then I think you go into but again, it's really cold, and that's something to think about. December in Cincinnati, there's snow on the ground, and to go from Seattle to Cincinnati in back-to-back weeks, I think is going to be difficult. But I think the Niners are the better team, so I'm going to say that you win that Bengals game. So you beat the you beat the Jags, but I think it's closer. I think you beat the Vikings, you lose to the Seahawks, and you beat the Bengals. But again, it's another one that's closer than it should be given the talent disparity, I guess.
And I actually had them kind of sweeping this 4-game stretch. So going into these final 4 games, I think I have them chalked up for 3 losses right now. So I mean, that would look great going into these final 4. I like that you brought up kind of like the snow in Cincinnati, though. I would say I think that benefits the 49ers more just based on their personnel. They're going to try to run the ball down your throat, and the Bengals are much more spread out. So I actually think that's, even though it's in Cincinnati, I do think it helps the Niners a little bit more. But moving on to this final 4-game stretch, you have the Falcons late season, and we've seen that game, was it 2 years ago? The Julio Jones crazy catch at the end of the game. I think that was 2 or 3 weeks before the year ended. Then in Tennessee, and that one's Thursday Night Football, and then at home against the Texans, and then in Los Angeles to close out the year. For me, I had them splitting this one. I had them losing on the road against Tennessee, and then again on the road against the Rams. So I actually had the Rams beating them twice, and definitely think that most likely it's going to be a split. But I mean, this is all just kind of projections, and based on my whole schedule, I had them going 12-5, which I think is really realistic. I think that's what they should do. I also do think that if you go 12-5, I think the Rams are a team that could definitely win 13 games. Would be really close. In this scenario, I kind of expected the Rams to be like a 13-win team. So it would come down to that final game of the year, which would be sweet. But what are your thoughts on just this final 4-game schedule and just kind of your overall record prediction for the Niners?
So last 4 games, I think you beat the Falcons. They have some major question marks, especially on defense. I agree. I think you lose this game against Tennessee. That's a tough game in Week 16, right as Derrick Henry begins to ramp up for all of his fantasy owners, as he does every year. And then you get the practice squad Texans. Love to see that in Week 17. That should hopefully be a win. And I do agree that we lose to the Rams in Week 18. Feels weird to say Week 18, but I think the Rams will be better than they were last year. But they have like two pass rushers, and we were able to beat them last year with pretty much exclusively touch passes. So I need to see the Rams I just make some significant strides. But I think we split with the Rams, which leads us to, I think my prediction is what, 13-4?
I think it
Lose.
was, yeah.
So I think we're going to win the division. I don't trust the Rams to take that big of a step up. I think Seattle's going to be bad. I think they're going to finish last in the division. And the Cardinal, I think 3 teams from the NFC West make the playoffs. And Seattle's that last team looking in. But I think it's a really competitive division. But again, things could go a lot of different ways. We're kind of just speculating here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you say, oh, Seattle, could be in last. Well, give all the other teams a couple injuries, and then they're the division winner. Like it can be that close. And also maybe these teams' records aren't that great because they kind of beat each other up. Like everyone does it to each other, and you see all 4 of them between like 7 and 11 wins. That would be something that could easily happen. Because I do think, I mean, even the Seahawks in a lot of other divisions, they have Russell Wilson. I mean, we've seen how great Russell Wilson has been for years. You can definitely see them winning a lot of divisions. This year, I think it's a lot tougher, especially the NFC West is going to be better than it was last year, assuming there's not as many injuries for these teams, though for a lot of them, there have been many in the past. And the Cardinals went out. They got J.J. Watt and A.J. Green as kind of their big moves, guys that have, battled injuries in these later seasons. But, I mean, I think all of these teams are really good where this division can go so many different ways. But I think 12-5, I think if, 12-5, depending on maybe Lance comes in, maybe he doesn't. I think that's pretty fair. I think we've seen how talented this team is. And we talked about, I think their over-unders 10 and a half, I want to say. So 12-5 seems pretty reasonable for me. Even 13 games. Also, I mean, you could see them, winning 10 games, but that could also make the playoffs. So, like, I think for them, it's getting into the playoffs. I don't think you have to win the division. We've seen so many teams with really good defenses, not win the division, then make big playoff runs, and then end up winning a Super Bowl. So it's really about getting there, especially now because there's only one team that has the bye. I don't think that any of the NFC West teams are going to, get that number 1 seed in the NFC, just because I think the Bucs are going to get that one. I think the Bucs are the best team right now, just for the whole roster. You look at their depth at a lot of positions that are important, and it's fantastic. So I definitely think the Bucs are the 1 seed overall in the NFC. But I think these NFC West games, interdivision games, are going to be awesome this year too. So definitely, if you're 49er fans living in San Francisco, you want to hit up all those because those are going to be awesome. But anything else before we kind of take off out of here, Aiden?
Yeah, I would say I think the games that are going to make or break the season, I touched on it really quickly, are these Jaguars and Bengals games coming off big division matchups the weeks before. I think you have to win both of those games. If you want to win the division, you could probably lose one of the 2 and make the playoffs. But if you lose both of those games, and both of those teams are going to be better, and depending on what happens the week before, the Niners could be like coming off a big win or a crushing divisional loss. I think those are the 2 games that we need to have circled that'll really take the temperature of how the season is going, I guess. And it's good that they're happening later in the season as well.
Yeah, you want to get that momentum late season, I feel like. So, I mean, if you get a big win, that could be crucial for a season. I mean, look at last year for the Niners. They have that crazy emotion, or 2 seasons ago, crazy emotional Week 17 game against the Seahawks. They win it, and then they just beat the Vikings and the Packers kind of with ease in the first 2 games of the playoffs, just kind of riding that high. So, I mean, we've seen a lot of teams like that. You see a lot of teams get hot towards the end of the year. I remember Andrew, I think it was his last season, Andrew Luck and the Colts, they got really hot and they would have been that 7th seed. They didn't make it. And so many people were like, hey, if they would have made the playoffs, they were probably the scariest team in the AFC right there. So getting hot at the right time is kind of the biggest thing. So, you get some early losses, but you win some pivotal games late in the year. I think that can be a huge difference. But I think that's going to end it for today's episode. So thanks everyone for listening. If this is your first time checking out the YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe. Same thing for the podcast as well on Apple, Spotify, whatever it is. But talk to you guys soon. And we're going to have an episode out probably in the next couple days about, the wide receiver 3 battle. And so make sure to stay tuned and check that out and subscribe and do all that stuff. So talk to you guys soon.